The last year and a half has been hard for me, to say the least. Last March, my brilliant and hilarious and beautiful girlfriend Natalie suddenly passed away. Everyone always gave shit about us because of politics. We met in college when we were poli-sci majors. She is very liberal, think AOC, and I'm pretty conservative. We actually met because we were serving as treasurers for our school's college Democrats and Young Republicans clubs, respectively. And our groups would get together for drinks or bowling or laser tag once a month. Well, Natalie and I bonded over a lot of shared interests and we hit it off. Even if we didn't see eye to eye on many issues, debating her was stimulating and formed the cornerstone of our relationship. We've had debates that went on until dawn. We just bounced off each other. She liked to joke that we were drift compatible. I wanted to marry this woman, but she passed away before we got a chance to talk about marriage. I'm in therapy and I'm working through not having her in my life anymore, but it's been rough. Then Rona happened and I got laid off, so I had to move back in with my parents and figure out what I am supposed to do now. My parents mean well, but they got married really young and are more conservative and religious than me. They've been trying to set me up on dates with single girls from their church since I moved back home. But I don't want to date these girls. No offense to them, but it's a small town in the American breadbasket. They don't share the same interests as me and it feels like their only goal in life is to be a good Christian wife and produce a lot of babies. Trying to talk to them about current events is excruciating for me. The girls my parents tried to set me up with take everything they read on Facebook or hear from Fox News for face value. It makes me miss Natalie and our debates more. My parents mean well. I know they want me to find a nice girl and settle down with her, but not like this. They are nothing like Natalie and never will be. I miss her, even if my folks didn't like her ideas. But when I told them the other night that I wanted them to stop setting me up on dates with these girls, they freaked out and told me that I needed to consider settling down since I just turned 30. They're good girls from great families, I know that, and my parents like them more than they liked Natalie, but she was my one and only. I don't think it's fair for anyone when I still love her. They are even more angry at me because I told them that I just don't see myself getting married anytime soon. But like I said, Natalie was my soulmate and I just can't see myself being with anyone else but her. Yet, they are insisting that I need to find a woman and settle down and give them grandchildren. We were seriously close to talking about marriage. But around the time she died, it was more like how funny it would be if the bridal party wore blue and the groomsmen wore red because the bride is a Democrat, and the groom is a Republican / Romeo and Juliet deal. I wish we got to do that. Natalie thought it was hilarious. A while back, my brother married a woman who had an 11-year-old son named Billy. A year later my sister-in-law gave birth to a little girl. 2 years later, she gave birth to a boy. Billy, who was 14 by this time, was treated like an outsider. My sister-in-law and brother saw him as a burden who spoiled their picture-perfect family. If you asked my sister-in-law how many kids she had, she would say 2. Billy started acting out. He got involved with a bad group of kids and started getting into trouble. He started failing all of his classes. He eventually got into drugs and was suspended from school. My brother and sister-in-law were fed up with him. I asked my brother if Billy could spend the summer with me and my husband. We have a hobby farm and I thought maybe getting away from his life for a while could help him some. Well, they were more than happy to get rid of him, my SIL's words. It was kind of rough the first few weeks. He had a lot of anger issues. But my husband kept his hands and mind busy doing work on the farm. And we both made sure that he knew he was loved and wanted. By August, he was a totally different kid. He wanted to keep living with us, but my sister-in-law insisted that he come home. After 2 months, he went back to his old ways due to his parents' indifference. They ended up sending him back to us and he lived with us throughout high school. He ended up being an A/B student and kept with a really great group of kids. He got involved in baseball and got a scholarship to a local university. He's 22 now and is in his last year of school. He's engaged to a really great girl. When he was 16 he started calling me mom and he started calling my husband pops. He never really had much to do with his mom and he had nothing to do with my brother. He saw them on holidays when the whole family came over. His mom has tried to have a relationship with him the past few years, but he has avoided her. On Christmas, sister-in-law was over, and for whatever reason, she opened my desk drawer and found a birthday card from Billy where he said, "To the best mom ever. Thanks for loving me and giving me a chance." She was devastated. She ended up texting Billy, confronted him and asked him if she would be presented as mother of the groom at his wedding. He told her that he no longer considered her his mom and wasn't even sure if he wanted her at the wedding at all. My sister-in-law is now insisting that I make it clear to Billy that I am not his mother and that he is not to refer to me as such. My brother is also very upset with me. Even my parents are pressuring me to do what sister-in-law wants for the sake of peace. Honestly, I consider Billy to be my son. I count him in with all of my children. I feel like telling Billy not to present me as mother of the groom could possibly be misinterpreted as me saying that I don't feel like he's my son, and I don't even want to take a chance of that happening. If he decides to present his real mom as mother of the groom, I will 110% support him. I have zero desire to tell Billy not to call me mom, and I absolutely won't do it because I know it would destroy him, and it would kill me. My sister-in-law insists that by not doing it, I'm making it impossible for her to have a relationship with him, and I'm being selfish. I have talked to Billy about it some. He doesn't like to talk about his mom at all. He basically just said that he doesn't see her as a mom and has for sure decided he doesn't want her at the wedding. I understand and respect that. I have a cousin, Kat, who got married to Henry early this year. We weren't close as kids. She was pretty spoiled and would always brag about how much designer stuff she has. Be really mean to people under the guise of just trying to help, etc. Don't go out of our way to interact with one another, but I do see her at family events and whatnot, and we make small talk. I'm engaged to Chris, who is a software engineer. He's co-head of his department at work with 2 other people, not too long ago. Chris was telling me about how they had some new employees and one of them sounded really familiar. He told me the name and I realized it was Kat's husband. Also, he and Henry hadn't met face to face yet. Kat and Henry had a huge wedding. It was really nice, but all she did for months is brag about how amazing her wedding was. The wedding stuff's died down now, so recently she started going on about how wealthy her husband is and what a great lifestyle they have. One of my other aunts celebrated her 50th about a week ago. I went with Chris and Kat was there with Henry. We were chatting and Kat was saying how Henry has a fantastic new job that pays even more than his previous one. Henry chimed in and said that they were already planning to buy a new house. Kat asked what Chris does. I said he was an engineer like Henry and he has a good job too, but I'll admit I left out where he works on purpose. She smiled and nodded, then said it's fine. She understands that I'm embarrassed and want to keep it quiet. So that was pretty much the end of our conversation then. When we were leaving, she pulled me aside and told me to let her and Henry know if we needed help with the wedding. Obviously I knew what she meant and it was just another dig, but I said, "Bye," and left. Literally 2 days later, I get a DM from Kat and she's furious, well, as much as one can be through text, that I didn't tell them that Chris was one of Henry's bosses. Henry was shocked to see him in the office and Chris made a comment, "Tell Kat OP and me don't need help but thanks for offering." Henry's really embarrassed and so's Kat, and she said that we made them look bad on purpose and if she knew, she'd have never made those comments. It was my duty to tell her and Henry. Chris and I had a really good laugh over this, but she sent a text out to the family group chat we have saying how she was blindsided by me. A few others said that what we did was petty and wrong. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times, and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem, and though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, The depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me. He had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl" were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. Two things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander when it comes to. This has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end, I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action, seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different, just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life, truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated.